Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the luxurious youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. How are you doing today, buddy?
I had to run home from work after this is from my part-time job. After working 9 hours, I had to run basically through a completely ridiculous storm. With the wind and rain blowing sideways and out to my car.
Like you actually ran. Like you ran, physically ran, like you didn't drive to work. Yeah. You actually walked to work.
No, okay. I ran to my car after getting out of work.
I see.
Yeah, I had to run to my car from the store. So
I thought you had to run all the way home, and I'd be wow. That's being a trooper.
No. I'm not that committed. Only that committed to this show. So that's off the table.
Well, that's nice to know.
How are you, Troy? How are you?
I'm doing good. Another day at work, and I'm always excited for Monday. It's like I texted you this morning, today or tomorrow, like we record this show either on Monday or Tuesday, and I'm like, please do it today because I'm so excited. Weekend, we don't talk sports. Our show's on the weekend. The other shows we do. But we haven't recorded anything then for like 3 or 4 days, and I'm just itching. I love talking sports with you. It's a great time. We do a number of shows, and getting on here to do the show is great, even though today's show, we will preface it saying you and I both agree, not going to be a long show like last week, but we did touch on a very important topic, and so I want to let listeners know, because I think it was a very good show after listening to it again. Kevin, you brought up a lot of good points about people in college and things they could do. We talked about the Penn State hazing incident and certain things that go along with that. And I think we actually put out there some examples, some stories, some things what you can do to try and stay out of situations like that. I would encourage everybody to go back, look in the archives on this network, thegruelingtruth.net, and look at Penn State hazing. I thought Kevin and I did a good job going over a lot of things involved with it. It was a little bit longer show, but I really enjoyed doing that show last week, Kevin. Today, going to talk a little bit about football in the Big Ten because there's big injury news, and like always, Las Vegas odds coming out months before the season even starts. You know my stand on the odds, but we'll talk about it because there is some relevance to it. There is some relevance to where these teams stand as far as preseason goes and the expectations that are associated with these programs. So it'll be fun to talk about that. But I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kevin. Big injury coming out of Nebraska could actually be a very big one because in college football, every week matters. You lose one, you might be okay. You lose two, boy, you're really behind the 8 ball and maybe out of it.
Yeah, and I don't think that the Nebraska Cornhuskers going into next season, this upcoming season, the 2017 season, thought that they were going to push for a national title, so to say. I think many realistic Nebraska fans think that they're going to have...
But I think they were pushing, Kevin, that they could win their division.
Right. Yeah, and that's the big thing with this is because, again, all you have to do is have a ball go your way in one game where you're not, quote unquote supposed to win, and you finish the season 11-1, and you beat the tiebreaker over, say, Wisconsin, and you get into the Big Ten title game, and you play a juggernaut like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. You get the upset, and it's like, hey, this Nebraska team went, 12-13-1. They beat the best teams in the Big Ten, had a close loss to whoever, and they're obviously the best. They proved they're the best team in the Big Ten. Boom, throw them in there as that last team if you don't think they're, insanely deserving. But there you go. You lose one game. If you lose one game and you win the Big Ten, you're getting into the college football playoff. That's just the way it's going to be until they, eliminate 4 teams from being in and make it 2 again, which isn't going to happen. So anytime the Big Ten winner, if you're a Big Ten winner, I should say, I'm not wording it correctly. If you're a Big Ten winner, you're getting into the title game. It would have to be a miraculous, 3-loss Wisconsin
unless
team.
You're Penn State.
Yeah, That's that's a very valid point.
I had to bring it up, Kevin. I had to bring it up. But I'm going to throw one little statement in here and then let you continue. The thing that you're talking about next year is, we've talked about this. Big Ten football is the best conference in America next year. The number of quality teams, and you especially look at the Penn State, the Michigan, the Ohio State. On the other side, maybe not as deep, but quality teams, and we're going to talk about Wisconsin here in a little bit, Nebraska. You got good teams over in the other division. Maybe the dominant teams are in the other division, but the Big Ten from top to bottom could very well be the best conference in college football next year.
Yeah, no question about it. And I guess I'll say this. You have to be a one-loss Big Ten winner, because I guess that's that's kind of where I was going, but you absolutely said it right, that you don't automatically get in if you win the Big Ten. Penn State a year ago started the year 2-2. They lost at Pitt, they lost at Michigan, then they ran through the rest of their schedule, they win the Big Ten title game, and then they get left out because people think Ohio State's better, even though Penn State beat Ohio State a year ago. But so I guess that's the key, is that you can't lose more than one game, and Troy mentioned that when he started. But so finally getting to the injury, Chris Jones is a corner. Any Nebraska fan knows the name Chris Jones. And I don't think it came out this past weekend that he had an injury to his knee. I think it's his left knee. He did something due to his meniscus. And so he's out for the timetable for this given injury is 4 to 6 months. 4 months from when it happened, it would put him on pace to get back for the Penn State game. It was, I think, November 15th, I believe it's going to take place. That's best case scenario. He tweeted out like, hey, I obviously plan on beating this thing out quicker than 4 months, but Chris Jones is the best player on that defense by basically anyone who covers Nebraska, the team, recruiting, whatever. Basically anyone that was on social media was like, wow, this sucks, because we just lost not only our best corner, not only our best secondary man, but our best defensive player. And Nebraska, like I was saying before, wasn't looking to win a national title this year, but like Troy said, lose one game, lose 2 games, win the tiebreaker against likely Wisconsin in the Big Ten West Division, and move on to the Big Ten title game, see what you can do. At worst, to play yourself into a Rose Bowl game if you win the Big Ten and aren't deemed worthy to be one of those top 4 teams. So to lose your top defensive player, like a year ago, Nebraska was 7-0 at home. It's not as though they were terrible. So they were a solid team. They won 9 games. There's supposed to be probably a little regression. Just looking at their schedule, this year they travel to Oregon. It seems like they've played Oregon the last 5 years. Obviously not the case, but it seems like they play Oregon every year now in the non-conference schedule. So they travel to Oregon. You get Wisconsin and Ohio State back-to-back. Then you play Northwestern, who's supposed to be decent. You travel to Minnesota, travel to Penn State, who's obviously going to be really good. And then you finish at home against Iowa. So there's a lot of tough games on this Nebraska schedule. You're getting the 2 best in the Big Ten probably in Ohio State and Penn State just in terms of talent. Then you also play Wisconsin because they're in your division. So it's going to be hard for Nebraska this year, and losing Chris Jones for at least the majority of the season is not good. And he's got a medical redshirt season to take if he wants to. So that would certainly help the 2018 team if that's what it comes down to. But obviously big news when a team like Nebraska, who can legitimately compete for its division within the Big Ten, a.k.a. make it to the Big Ten title game and pull an upset, and there you go, you're in the Rose Bowl. So when a team like that loses your best player on defense, it's at least worth mentioning on the show.
Yeah, definitely, Kevin. This guy, Chris Jones, is going to be a good player. And knee injury, you never know what's going to happen. I know he's going to say he's going to attack it, he's going to beat it, blah, 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 blah. I've had a knee injury, and every single knee injury is to a specific person. I think Adrian Peterson actually ruined it for everyone else as fast as he came back at a high level. And now everybody thinks, well, Adrian Peterson did it, so everybody can do it. Every knee injury is different. I came back from mine rather quickly back in the day when they didn't have all the technology, but I want to share this story because I think it is relevant. I had a friend of mine that injured his knee, not the same time, but prior to that, and he had problems with that knee for 3 years, Kevin. There was complications. He had blood clots, different things that happen. You're still having surgery, and I know some of it can be, unintrusive. They can do lasers now and all those things, but needless to say, they're in there and they're repairing something that had been torn. So there is things going on inside your knee that have to heal, and not everybody heals the same. So, yeah, you can say, here's the timetable, and that's great. You want to hope that everything goes well, rehab goes great, and fine, you come back in this timetable. But everybody's body is different. And whenever you have surgery, no matter how unintrusive it is, that's the word I'll use, you're still having surgery. You're still having something done to internal organs and internal parts of your body that have to heal. And everybody's body heals different. I hope he comes back. I actually like watching this kid play. And I know he's on a competitor, and I know he's against my Wisconsin Badgers, but this kid is fun to watch. This is a kid that could play at the next level. And so this injury, we'll see how he comes back. But for Nebraska, Kevin, like you said, I don't think they thought this team could contend and be a top 10 team, but definitely a team that can contend in their division because they have a big game against Wisconsin. And that's the game. That's the game that's probably circled on the schedule that, hey, we've got to take care of business everywhere else. But that's the game. That Wisconsin game is the game. It's at home, and they got to win that one. They win that one, Kevin, and they take care of business the rest of the way, they're going to have the tiebreaker over a Wisconsin team that has a pretty soft schedule, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But for Nebraska, if you're looking at it, I know you mentioned medical redshirt, and if I'm this guy, we're really going to find out something about this kid. And this is why I say this. If he decides to come back and play, he knows it's because Nebraska has a chance. And there might be a lot of this to do with how the team is doing up to that point, Kevin. But I would say for him, for future, looking at his long-term future NFL possibility, I would take the red shirt. But if the kid comes back because Nebraska's doing okay and possibly could do some good things in the division, then you know this kid is all about college and all about his team. But if I'm this kid, I'm greedy. And I'm greedy about the money. I'm greedy about my future and saying, look, don't really care about the 2017 season. I want to make sure my knee is 100% because I have a chance to play at the next level. I'm just going to take the whole year off, get my knee strong, come back, play in 2018, try to improve my draft stock because if I go out and play in 2017 with maybe a 75-80% knee, Kevin, I may not look as good as I did in the past, and it could hurt my draft stock. So the greedy part of that, if he's really looking at himself as it is about me, he probably redshirts. If he's about the team, he's going to come back. But in today's world, Kevin, I know I always like, hey, team players, all these things. But I look at the injury now in the middle of summer, coming back in the middle of the year, unless it is absolutely 100%, I would tell the kid to redshirt. Look out for his long-term future. I know he probably wants to help the team, and, again, I'll say it, a lot of it's going to depend on how Nebraska's doing up until that point. Your thoughts? And then let's move on to these Vegas odds.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you. I mean, that's the realistic approach. I think for him, and you're, a player and you have this devastating injury and you're going into your senior year and it's like, all right, here we go. This is the last hurrah. Our team is going to be decent enough. I know that I myself am a great player and I'm looking forward to the NFL, but I obviously got a full season ahead of me. This should be fun. But you have a major knee injury, and it's just like, well, okay, do I just completely lay off a year and wait till I'm 100% and just watch my team, suffer and go 7-4 and, just have a fine season without me? or do I try and attack it and push, to get healthier maybe a month sooner than he would if he was lackadaisical about it? I don't know. It's tough to say. I think that in general you'd be excited and ready to, basically just, and these aren't the words he's using, and they're the words I'm using, basically attack this and go after it and try to get healthy for that mid-November game against Penn State if it takes exactly 4 months. But I'm with you that if I'm the head coach, if I'm him, if I'm, realistically being greedy and taking draft stock into account, I would sit out this year. I don't think Nebraska is going to be a title contender this year. I don't think Nebraska is going to be a national title contender next year. But regardless, like you said, if he does pull off this miraculous, 3.5 month rehabilitation process and he feels 90%, you're still at 90%. You're still thinking about your knee. You're still only playing, 4 or 5 games tops for NFL scouts to actually look at your film, your most recent film. And they can look and say, hey, you're not the same exact player you were even a year ago. So there are other players who have obviously gotten better over the last year. You fall a few rounds because of it. It just for selfish reasons, NFL purposes, absolutely take the year off. But I doubt that's how he's going to see it. That's just my personal opinion. But that's it for me with this topic. The one thing I'll get to before the odds, for next season, Penn State got 5 commitments over this past weekend, and the name of the event is blanking in my mind right now as to what it is, but it's a huge Penn State recruiting weekend this past weekend, and they got 5 commits from it. And I'll just basically go over very briefly before I move over the odds. But and this is going to take me a second to get through, but Daniel George is a 4-star receiver. Committed a day ago. This is all class of 2018. Just scrolling through 2 days ago as a 3-star athlete, Shaquan Anderson-Butts. Judge Culpepper was 3 days ago as a defensive end. He's a 3-star. Will Levis, I guess I'll save him for last. They got a kicker a couple days ago, and then 3 days ago, or 2 days ago, Will Levis is a 3-star pro-style quarterback. The reason I wanted to kind of point him out was because they had Justin Fields under his verbal commitment. He's the number one ranked quarterback for the class of 2018, this, basically next Deshaun Watson type prospect. And he said, nope, I'm going to reopen my commitment. We talked about it, a couple weeks ago about how Penn State had this, next godly quarterback to follow Trace McSorley and keep Penn State in this, top 5 national discussion, basically, like they have been over the past year. But they lost his verbal commitment, and they got this 3-star pro-style quarterback's commitment, which obviously isn't the same as replacing a potential Deshaun Watson. But these are all class of 2018 guys. We have no idea how they're going to pan out. We have no idea if Will Levis is going to take away his verbal commitment. We have no idea if Justin Fields is going to, say, hey, in the end, I want to go to Penn State anyway. So this is all class of 2018 stuff. Nothing is finalized. But Penn State got 5 verbal commitments, which I think, again, just shows that Penn State is a sought-after program for recruits these days, and the Big Ten is going strong.
Yeah, Kevin, my whole thought on these verbal commitments. It's great, and it really does come down to numbers, though. So you look at it from this standpoint, 5 is a pretty big number. And even if you get 2 of those out of those 5, that's still pretty solid. So it's all about numbers. I talked about it on a prior show. When I recruited in college, it's all about numbers. You have plan A, plan B. You want guys to commit, but that you have to continue, and it's all about numbers. Now, if they get all 5, wow, that's really good for them. Honestly, Kevin, you tell me today here in July of 2017 that there's 5 verbal commitments, that's great. By next year, of those 5, how many are actually going to go to Penn State? If you tell me 2 or 3 of them, I think that's a win. I don't think all 5 end up going to Penn State. That's just the way verbal commitments work. So let's move on to these Vegas odds because, again, I'm not big on the odds themselves, but I'm excited to talk about expectations of the teams that the odds are associated with.
Yeah, and one, not to bang on the recruiting drum one more time, but Ohio State got this, I believe he's a 5-star tight end. He's the number 1 ranked tight end for the class of 2018, Jeremy Ruckert. He just signed didn't sign, but verbally pledged to Ohio State 2 hours ago as we're recording this on a Monday. So Ohio State got basically the next huge tight end prospect. That's, if he goes to Ohio State, you'll know the name Jeremy Ruckert in a couple years. But that's the last recruiting thing I'll throw out there to get to Vegas odds finally. And I guess one more little quick thing. I have a college basketball topic, Troy, that I wanted to touch on because there are selection committee rule changes that are going through. They're basically not strictly going through the RPI anymore. They're taking into account some other things. So I wanted to touch on that as well after these Vegas odds for football. But finally getting into these odds, and I've got to bring up the exact numbers, but I have who the favorite is in each division and whatnot. And Ohio State is the favorite in their division, and they're actually a big favorite in their division, which as an Ohio State fan, frankly, it surprises me because I think they're as good as Penn State next year. I don't think they should be heavily favored whatsoever. They're the second favorite to win the national title. They're the favorite to win the Big Ten. Ohio State, according to Vegas, is supposed to be phenomenal next year. And I'll say that their offense should be pretty good, but there's some unproven guys. I think they'll have a really strong running attack between Barrett and Weber. But passing-wise, I think it's still to be seen what Ohio State can do. I think Penn State with Trace McSorley at quarterback again and Saquon Barkley back at running back, probably the best running back in college football next year in Penn State. I think Penn State's going to be an incredible offense once again this year. And Penn State beat Ohio State a year ago. So you've got your 2 best offensive players coming back. I don't think too much changes there. Ohio State's D-line is going to be great. But to have Ohio State as big a favorite as they are to win the Big Ten and to beat out Michigan and Penn State in that division is surprising to me as a Buckeye fan. But the other thing I want to touch on with these odds is Wisconsin is the second favorite to win the Big Ten, not Michigan, not Penn State. I think for me personally, I think Ohio State's a top 5 team next year. I think Penn State's a top 5 team next year. Then you got Michigan and Wisconsin probably around top 10 to 15. That's just what I presume talent-wise going into the season. Not that I'm an all-knowing God, but I think Ohio State and Penn State have a notch more of talent than Michigan and Wisconsin. That's just the way I see it. So to see Ohio State as heavy favorites on one side and to see Wisconsin be the second favorite in large part because of the schedule, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Troy. It's probably a huge part of it is because Michigan has to play Penn State. Michigan has to play Ohio State. Penn State has to play the other 2. Ohio State has to play the other 2. Wisconsin, to my knowledge anyway, doesn't have to play, and I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately, but I don't think Wisconsin plays Penn State or Ohio State, and I think they get Michigan at home. I'd have to double-check it, but that's probably the big reason as to why Wisconsin's the second favorite. Maybe Vegas thinks Wisconsin's the second-best team in the Big Ten. I could be wrong, but they are the second favorite to win the Big Ten this year, right behind Ohio State and ahead of Michigan and Penn State.
Well, I'll tell you why they're the second team and why their odds are there is because they should win their division. They should be playing in the Big Ten championship game. When you look at that division, it's still going to be competitive. We just talked about Nebraska. Nebraska's going to be a good little team. Even without Chris Jones, Kevin, I think they're a team that will be right up near the top. That game against Wisconsin is huge. It's just a huge game. It's going to be huge for both of them. It's either going to be the game where Nebraska says, look, we have a chance to play in the Big Ten championship, or it's the game where Wisconsin says, here, we're going to kick you in the gut because we still rule the roost over here. And so it's a huge game, and it's always tough to play at Nebraska. Actually, it's tough to play anywhere in the Big Ten on the road. That's what I love about Big Ten football. I don't care how bad you are, even in a down year. For example, Wisconsin going to Minnesota when they're down. That was never an easy game. Even Iowa, when they're down, going to Iowa and playing there, teams don't want to do it. To travel in the Big Ten and play on the road is not an easy task. but I think the reason that you see Wisconsin as the second favorite, Kevin, is not talent. I think it's where they're at in the Big Ten for their division, and Vegas is believing that they're going to play in the Big Ten championship game, so why not give them the second best odds to win the Big Ten because they're going to be in the championship game. To give the second to a Penn State or Michigan, they're thinking Ohio State's going to win their division, which I agree with them. I think Ohio State will win that division. It's going to be tough. You got Penn State and Michigan in there, but if you're going to say Ohio State's going to win that, it's hard to put Michigan or Penn State as the second favorite because they wouldn't even be playing the Big Ten championship game according to your other odds. So I see where those odds are coming from, but if you rank it as far as teams go, I actually put Wisconsin as the fourth best team in the Big Ten, Kevin, and I'm a Wisconsin guy. You know, I know the one thing that's going to be really good next year is that offensive line. I went back last year, and when I previewed the Badgers, that offensive line to me was the question mark. A lot of guys coming in, some junior college guys, some young guys, some sophomores on that line, and I was like, well, how good is that offensive line going to be? And, man, it was pretty good last year, and now they're together. They lost a couple pieces, but Paul Chryst, I'll tell you what, Kevin, you go and look at what he wants to recruit. He's recruiting those big, burly offensive line guys. He wants Wisconsin to get back to good old Big Ten football and run the football. And we're going to play with a mediocre quarterback. That's the way Wisconsin football is, and we're going to build on the defensive side of the ball. They lost some good guys to the NFL on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm going to tell you what, Kevin, I like the young guys. Not going to be a great team. Not going to be a great team that is a national contender. The thing that's going to help them, though, Kevin, is the schedule. They have a, what I call, air quote, soft schedule, which could pad their record and make them look better than they really are. I'm a realistic Badger fan. They could be a team that is 11, 12, and 1 or 2. They're not going to be as good as 11, 12, 11 and 2, 12 and 1, because they, talent-wise, they're young. They've got some question marks, but record-wise, they should be a very good team next year because of their schedule. There's my quick thought on the Badgers, and you wanted my thoughts? There you go.
Yeah, and it's to me, it's I completely 100% agree. I think that's really all you can make of it. I think Wisconsin and Michigan will be very good teams next year, but Michigan just has to replace so much, and Wisconsin, like you said, Troy, their offensive line should be really strong, no question about it. And with that, I think you'll see Wisconsin just steamroll over certain teams because their offensive line will dominate.
And Paul Chryst, not to interrupt, Paul Chryst will want to control the ball. Again, you're going to have a mediocre quarterback. I know there's some skill level there, and we always hope as Badger fans, Kevin, we got blessed when we had Russell Wilson. But you take Russell Wilson out of that equation, and how many other Wisconsin quarterbacks have made a career in the NFL as impact players? None. A couple of them have went into the NFL, and they're viable one-game backups. But at Wisconsin, you're probably never going to get a 4-star, 5-star quarterback to go to Wisconsin when Paul Chryst is the coach. Paul Chryst wants to run the ball, wants to control the clock, wants a game-type manager at quarterback, a guy that can make some throws, and that's the problem with Wisconsin. They're going to try to control the clock, get the lead, play good defense, run out the clock. So if Wisconsin ever gets behind, Kevin, they don't have a playmaker at quarterback to do that. That's not Paul Chryst football. Paul Chryst football is ball control, pound it, grind it, beat you up, and we're going to pound you on the defensive side of the ball. So sorry to interrupt. Wanted to throw that out there because I think it's important for fans to understand that don't follow Wisconsin football. That's what they want to do, and that's their downfall when they get in these games. Like against the Penn State that has a great offense, they get behind. They're not coming back.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Playing Michigan, I think, would be very interesting, and that's, to me, the biggest obstacle in Wisconsin's schedule this year. And I think at BYU week 3 won't be a cupcake game. I think the following, actually, they get a bye right before that next game in week 5. So week 4 they have a bye. Week 5 they play Northwestern. I would have thought that 3-week stretch would have been a little difficult. At BYU, then you get Northwestern. It's at home, but Northwestern's still not going to be bad next year. And then at Nebraska the week after, but they get a bye between BYU and Northwestern. Ultimately, if Wisconsin can get past BYU week 3, I do think that'll be a legitimate game. I am not sure on the ins and outs of BYU football coming into 2017, but I would assume, just like they have been for the last 15 years, it seems like, BYU will be pretty good, and at home they'll be tough to beat. No matter if you're Penn State, Ohio State, Alabama, Wisconsin, whoever, to go to BYU and win is not going to be a cupcake game. I'll say that much. So I think at BYU can be troublesome. Northwestern at home after a bye. Wisconsin should be fine there. The week after at Nebraska, like Troy said, that'll be interesting. But after that, it's Purdue, it's Maryland, it's Illinois, it's Indiana, it's Iowa at home. And then finally you get Michigan at home the second to last week of the season. And then you travel to Minnesota with basically probably everything to play for on the line. So I expect Wisconsin to win that one. I think Wisconsin at home to Michigan, I think you get 2 probably evenly talented teams. I think Wisconsin's offensive line against Rashawn Gary and that Michigan defensive line will be a very interesting watch. And that'll be huge for Wisconsin, whether they're, however many games it is at that point, 3, 6, 9, 10, they could be 10-0 going into that game because of how their schedule plays out. And I'm with you, Troy. That's probably how Vegas sees it. Ohio State is 5 to 6 odds to win the Big Ten. So they're vastly the heavyweights in this conference, according to Vegas, which I just don't agree with. And then Michigan and Penn State are 11-2, and Wisconsin smushed in there at 15-4. So after that, Nebraska and Northwestern are actually tied 16-1, Iowa at 20-1. Then you get Minnesota 33-1, Michigan State at 50-1. Seems crazy, but that's what it is. Then Indiana, Maryland, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers to finish it out. But basically it's Ohio State, Wisconsin, and if Michigan, Penn State make a run, that's great. But I think the interesting thing for me, I guess, with this is if there were one team that I would bet on to make the Big Ten title game, it wouldn't be Ohio State, my favorite team, because, again, I think Penn State is right on par with them. So I wouldn't put money on Ohio State to even make the Big Ten title game. I would put money on Wisconsin to do it. That's probably how Vegas sees it. That's how Troy and I see it. So just thought it would be interesting to throw out there. Any last thoughts, Troy, before I guess I move on to this college basketball little change?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not a big guy about odds, and I'm not a betting guy, but they come out and people will probably place bets here this week. And again, you look at it, and it's really, to me, a coin flip, Kevin, between Ohio State and Penn State. But I give the edge to Penn State because offensively, like you said, you got some dominant offensive players. And in college football, when you have dominant offensive players, they're game changers. We know defense wins championships, but you got to score points. And when I watched Penn State last year and watched these guys play, God, if they can put up a lot of points, doesn't matter how good your defense is. I mean, Wisconsin had a very good defense last year, and look what Penn State did to them. I mean, defensively, you can wear a squad down when you have a really good offense and an efficient offense, and that's what Penn State has. I know Ohio State, traditionally also a very strong defense, and it's Urban Meyer. He's going to have a strong defense, does great recruiting on that side of the ball. But when you have an efficient offense, Kevin, that can move the chains, can convert on third down, I don't care how good your defense is. It's going to wear on you emotionally, and it's going to wear on you physically the longer you're on the field. And that's, again, I'm not going to parallel Wisconsin and Penn State. Penn State's offense a little bit different dynamic than what Wisconsin wants to do. But the reason Wisconsin is successful, they pound the ball. They pound the ball. You look back, how many great college running backs, and I put it that way, great college running backs has Wisconsin had over the years. Tons of great college running backs. Didn't so much pan out in the pro game, But I think part of that is because they ride them. They ride those backs at Wisconsin, and they say carry the load. And they have great college running backs. And that's how they won all those games when Barry Alvarez was there, because they literally physically beat you up offensively with the running game. Now, Penn State does it a little bit different. They can incorporate the run game. They've got a good passing game. They can move the chains. They can keep their offense on the field and just wear you down physically by being on the field for so many plays. And that's where I give the edge to Penn State, Kevin. I know you probably don't like me for saying that, but in that side, I look at Penn State just because I think offensively they're going to be able to do what they want to do against any team they play against, and you're just going to have to hope they're not on that day offensively. They've got too many weapons on the offensive side of the ball for any other team in the Big Ten, honestly, to compete with them every week for that 60 minutes. Now, they're going to have bad games, and they're going to be off, and maybe there's a turnover here and there that will change the tide and flip the table. But when you look on paper and you look at the scouting, Penn State offensively, the best one in the Big Ten, and they literally can do what they want against any other team in the Big Ten. That's my final thought on the football side of things.
Yeah, I'll just put this quickly, there's no better quarterback running back combo in the country to me than McSorley and Barkley. I think McSorley's at least college 2017, not talking about pro potential, but just this next year, and there's some exceptional quarterbacks. You know, there's one from Wyoming that not a lot of people know about right now. He's probably going to be a top 5 pick this upcoming NFL draft. But there's Oklahoma State's quarterback, Mason Rudolph. That's not even getting into the Sam Darnolds and Josh Rosens that people know about, Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. There's so many really good quarterbacks, but just going into next year, McSorley, to me, easily top 10, and Barkley's probably the best running back. So you've got 2 exceptional players at quarterback and running back. And when you don't have to lean on your quarterback to throw it 50 times and score 50 points, that's great, because you've got the number 1 back in the country, to me, in Barkley. And what he does physically and with his vision, it's going to be a show to watch Penn State every week, and their offense light teams up. What Ohio State has going for it is arguably the best defensive line you could ever see in college football because of how deep it is. And, you know, their 5th and 6th best defensive linemen are, 5 stars, 4 stars who have already proven in some cases that they can be really productive against other teams' starting offensive linemen. They can just come in and you can just swap bodies and you're perfectly good to go with the next great athlete, as a pass rusher. So Ohio State's D-line next year, easily the best in the country, in my opinion. Could be the best we'll have seen in a long time. And so that's where Ohio State can just physically manhandle teams and give teams no shot. If you have an offensive line like a Wisconsin, there's your, counter to an exceptional D-line. So that, Ohio State's D-line against Penn State's offense and getting to McSorley and limiting Barkley, that'll be huge. That'll be just great football to watch. As a Penn State, Ohio State fan or not, it'll be a great battle. I think in general, though, to favor Penn State because of that combination of McSorley and Barkley, it's nothing to sniff at or laugh at because I fully understand it as an Ohio State fan. I think that's it for football. With basketball, I didn't even tell you, Troy, before the show started because I forgot about it. But
yeah, thanks for throwing a loop in the show there. I appreciate that.
I'll be sure to explain this thoroughly. I was reading this weekend that on Friday, the NCAA was doing their committee, the selection committee. So we're talking about, March Madness and seeding teams and whatnot, and the criteria that they look at going into picking teams and where they seed teams eventually for the 68-team field. And on Friday in Chicago, they announced in a vote that basically they want to highlight the importance of winning on the road more than ever before. And so every single year it's, okay, how many quality wins does this team have, or how many bad losses does that team have? And so quality wins now for at least going into next season is changed for what it's been for the last few years. the last few years, I'll try to put this neatly so that people understand. Basically, the last few years, you get big wins by beating a top 50 RPI team. And then you get solid wins for beating a team with the RPI rank of 51 to 100. And then 101 to 200. And then, below 200, it's just, a win against a terrible team is basically how it's sought after. So this season, basically those categories, instead of just, hey, we have 6 top 50 RPI wins, and we have 4 top 51 to 100 RPI wins, and we have 3 RPI wins against teams who are terrible. This year, it's going to be home games against teams ranked 1 to 30, and then it's neutral site games against top 50 teams, and then there's road games against opponents in the top 75. That's just one category. So if you beat a team who's ranked number 1 on your home court, that's the same as beating a team ranked number 75 in the country away from home, essentially is what that's meaning. So they're putting a much bigger price and favoritism toward winning on the road, essentially. And there's a second column where you win a home game against a team ranked 31 to 75 and neutral site games from 51 to 100. And so if you beat, now just for this example, if you beat the number 31 ranked team at home, it's going to be weighed the same, at least, technically to the committee. Beating the number 131 team at home is the same as beating the number 135 team on the road. That's what it's equating out to in this, graphical column spreadsheet, I guess, so to say. There's also a third column and a fourth column that just goes further down the line. But so basically, I think you get my point that if you beat the Kansas Jayhawks at home, that's the same as beating, Iowa, not Iowa State. That's a bad example. I would say, I guess, Oklahoma State on the road. So beating Kansas at home is the same as beating, Oklahoma on the road. A very marginal team, a team ranked 75th, is the same on the road as the same as a home win against the number 1 team in the country. I think that example is a bit extreme. That's obviously the biggest extreme in this example, but it would be viewed the same. You have 1 home win against a team ranked in the top 30, and you have 1 road win against a team in the top 75. That's equal. That's, not to say that this is all math and viewed the same exactly, but that's how they're basically determining it, as opposed to, hey, we have 6 top 50 RPI wins. That's not going to be a thing anymore. It's going to be, hey, we beat 4 teams on the road in the top 75 and 3 home wins in the top 30. So that's 7 really good wins in total. So I guess your immediate thoughts to that, Troy.
They are complicating things beyond belief. They're just complicated. Okay, they talk about everything and the best teams and so on and so forth and everything that's going on. I never understood the committee, and I never will. I mean, what are they going to have, 800 columns now? And the RPI, and even the RPI to me, Kevin, was like, oh, whatever, because you're going to go out and you're going to schedule games. And part of the scheduling, you look at the schedule, and you know what I've said about this. It's all about playing more conference games. But even in your conference, you can't pick and choose who you want to play then. And all this is going to do is it's just going to change the way people schedule in the future. They're going to schedule differently, and I can understand the overall concept, if that makes sense. What their thought is, okay, instead of bringing in a Rhode Island, well, that's even probably a bad example. I don't know why I brought that up. Like a technical school, instead of bringing them in for a cupcake, they're going to maybe bring in a different team that's ranked a little higher. I understand what they're trying to do, but again, it's complicating things. This is a simple game, Kevin. Win basketball games. Just win. Just put together a good team and win basketball games. That's all I want them to do. This selection committee confuses everyone, and then when they make their picks, Who knows what they're doing? They're trying to put some kind of chart together so at the end of the year, when they crumple the chart up and throw it in the garbage because they don't like a team, they can go back and they can say, well, this is how I validate my pick. I validate it because of this, because of one win in column X. No. To me, the selection committee is at sometimes bias. It's human nature. Somebody likes a team. They're going to pick a team. This is a way for them to try and validate some of these bad picks that they make. That's all it is to me. And I'm sorry I put it that way. For people that think they do a great job, a lot of times they get it right, but there's always those marginal picks. And I think, Kevin, the reason they did this is to validate those because of that criticism. Because at the end of the day, it's human beings in that room that are going to pick teams they like. That's what it comes down to. I know they're going to put together this chart and say, the chart says, bull crap. Bull crap. It's a selection committee, and if somebody likes a team, they're going to pick that team, and now they're just putting together a chart so that guy can say, okay, where's the team I like? What do they have? Did they have this win? Oh, great, because now it's in column Z. They got this. I can push for my team to get in because they got to win in column Z. That's all I see it being, Kevin. I don't know if that made any sense with my babble, but that's all I have.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from. Because if you sit here and look at it like, hey, if you beat the number 160 team on the road at home, it's the same as beating the number 237 ranked team on the road. That's like, okay, that's cool, but so what does that mean? And so in short, in general, they're putting a much heavier weight on winning on the road, which just to that, if you just leave it at that, it's like, okay, I'm in favor of it. Because it's instead of just, hey, we have 7 top 50 RPI wins. Well, it's like, okay, if you beat the number 48 RPI team at home by 2 points and you should have crushed them, that shouldn't be, this excellent victory. It shouldn't be. So to win on the road and beat a quality team, even if they're ranked a little lower than beating a higher-ranked team at home where you should, quote-unquote, win or have a better advantage since you're at home, that's cool. That makes sense to me. If you just leave it at that, that's great. I'm with you that now there's even more ways to get out of saying, hey, Syracuse didn't deserve a bid this year because they only had 4, wins against, in this third column, literally is how it's put. There's 4 different columns, as opposed to, the different columns of top 50 RPI wins of 51 to 100, and so on. So it's just different. They basically made it so that road games are favored over home games, and you can get away with playing lesser teams but having to travel and beat them. Scheduling a top 100 team at home that you're supposed to kill, no longer does that necessarily mean a great win. So I like it from that perspective, but I hear exactly what you're saying, Troy, that there are tons of little things that committee members, which consist of athletic directors, so it's not, Michigan State's athletic director is quoted. He's the committee chairman, Mark Hollis. Michigan State athletic director Mark Hollis is quoted in this article, basically talking about it. So if you have Mark Hollis voting on where Michigan State should be ranked and where they should be seated and where they should be playing their first 2 games of the tournament, he's going to put them closer to Michigan State's home campus and home floor, and he's going to want to give them a higher seed because it's Michigan State's athletic director. Of course he's going to want to give a favorable out for Michigan State. So that's the NCAA selection committee. You've got a bunch of athletic directors and people at schools who have agendas and want to give their schools the best possible out in March Madness. So, you can take what you want from it, but in short, to keep it sweet, it's better to get a solid road win than it is to schedule a solid team at home now. Not every win is kind of ranked the same just because you're in the top 50. It takes into account winning on the road more, which, in short, again, I'm in favor of.
Yeah, I think it will help too, Kevin, to get some of these other teams that are mid-majors maybe to actually get a bigger draw, to get a top 10 team to come play at their facility. If that's
right.
what the NCAA is doing, I think that's a positive. It really is. And I think that should happen because a lot of times, for example, a Valparaiso, which is a team that is considered a mid-major but a good program, it's hard for them to get a Kentucky or a Kansas or even a Gonzaga to go play there. And so now maybe with this rule change, you're going to see some more of these top 10, top 20 teams traveling to mid-majors to play. So I like that part of it. But at the end of the day, Kevin, it all comes down to the same thing with the selection committee. And I've said this for a number of years, probably more years than you've been alive, that the selection committee has to stop being athletic directors. It should be a third party. It should almost be like an arbitrator in baseball. Teams that don't have a vested interest in any of the programs. I've been saying it for years. It's never going to change because that's the way it is. But, I mean, like I said, I understand why they're doing it. Hopefully, in what I'll air quote, the spirit of this rule change, hopefully what it'll do is draw those top 20 programs into the campuses of mid-majors, which will then help them when it comes to seeding. I think that's part of what they're looking to do. So with that said, Kevin, another great show in the books for Go Big or Go Home. Make sure you follow the youngster on Twitter. He's at Kid Cunny. I'm the old man. Find me on Twitter, TroyRobert967. Have a great day, everyone. We'll talk at you next week.